Islam Explained. We are joined by our theologian, Omer A Ergi. Welcome to the program, Omer.
Thank you, Veysel. It's good to be here.
It's always a pleasure having you here. So today we'll be discussing some of the most complex topics of Islamic theology in a series of programs that we'll be conducting. So today we'll be asking yourself about some Quranic expressions, why they appear to be anthropomorphic. Expressions such as Yadullah, the hand of Allah. So what do they mean and how should we understand them? Omar?
Yes, thank you for the question, Veysel. Inshallah, we will be doing a series of, like you said, programs and addressing this type of topics because they are important topics of Usuluddin, which is regarded as Islamic theology, also Aqaidul Islam, Creed of Islam. And these expressions you just mentioned that may seem anthropomorphic, and this is why they need to be interpreted as well. Now, it's good to point out that in the Qur'an there are two types of verses. One type is called muhkam, which means that the meaning is quite clear. And the other type of verse is mutashabihat, which means meaning unclear, metaphoric. It should be interpreted, it could be allegorical, so they need interpretations. And therefore these expressions, such as the one you mentioned, Yadullah, the hand of Allah, Wajhullah, the face of Allah, countenance of Allah, or verses like Istiwa al-arsh, he sits on his throne, requires interpretations because in Islamic theology, God is transcendent. It's very clear. And this is defined through his attributes of transcendence, which we call Selbi Sifats. And they are the transcendent attributes. And these are, we can put it in a very basic form, wajib al-wujud, for example, which means necessary existence. So God's existence is necessary. Wahdaniya, oneness and unity of God, but this is not a mathematical one. And as you know, in maths, numbers can be divided or multiplied, but his oneness is unique. There's nothing like onto it. There is the sifat attribute of qadam, which means beginningless. God does not have a beginning. You cannot restrict God by time. And there is baqa also. He's another attribute of God, transcendent attribute, which means endlessness. So God will never cease to exist. Everything will have an ending, but except God. And then we have qiyam bi nafsi, another selbi attribute, which means self-subsisting. So God does not, he's not contingent, he does not depend on external factors to exist or sustain himself. Qiyam bi nafsi, that's the name of it. And the last one is muhallafatul hawadith, which means unlike the creation. Unlike anything anyone can imagine. God is unlike anything anyone can imagine. And as you know, in Surah Ihlas, this is mentioned very clearly, which says there is nothing can be resembled unto him. So he doesn't have opposites, or he doesn't have anything that you can compare him with. So it's very clear that these are all transcendence attributes of God. So since we can confirm this with the Qur'an and the Sunnah and Ijma, which is the consensus of the scholars, then these expressions need interpretations. It's quite obvious. And otherwise, if we did not do this, some people may fall into the position of what we call mushabbiha or mujassima. Mushabbiha means corporalism, or no, mushabbiha could mean anthropomorphism, giving human qualities to God, and mujassima means giving a jisim, which is an object or shape or form to God. So we can fall into this.
Could be quite dangerous.
It could be quite dangerous.
So that's why we need to leave these into scholars' hands to interpret things like this to us.
Yes, indeed. And they did. They did. Especially the Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat scholars have addressed this issue quite in detail. So we can say that those two terms, because there have been schools or sects or people who fell into this category of anthropomorphism, which is tashbih, or corporalism, which is tajsim. So these topics were heavily debated, as we said before, during the classical era of Islamic theology, and early scholars in particular, they held the position of tafwid. It means consignment in English, which meant that we accept the verses as they are, but we consider these terms as attributes, not as actual physical components. We accept them as attributes. In particular, Imam Abu Hanifa, in his Fiqh al-Akbar, book Fiqh al-Akbar, he explains this as well there in detail. His solution was, in regards to these expressions, huwa lahu sifatun bila kayf, which means they are attributes without description. Their essence are unknown to us. So these attributes, the essence of them, unknown to us. He did this to avoid the meaning of the expression could. People could think about this as limiting the sifat of Allah, limiting the attribute of Allah. Because if you say the hand means this, you are limiting the interpretation to just that. Yeah. So Abu Hanifa thought the best way to solve this is huwa lahu sifatun bila kayf. Their essence are unknown, they are attributes without description. And we call this tafweed, the position of tafweed. But we should not sort of mix this or confuse it with anthropomorphism. They're completely different because they are literalists. For example, there were sects in history such as the Hashawiyya who took the meaning quite literally, and they said if God says he has a hand, then he has a hand. That was their view. And these types of schools were left out of the mainstream Islam, Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat, as they were making, as we mentioned before, either tashbih or tajsim. To make tashbih, anthropomorphism, is like saying, God is like human-like. And tajsim, you can say God is made up of energy, God is made up of components, God is made up of jism, an object, and this is tajsim. And this is all not permitted in mainstream Islamic theology, and as you said before, it's quite dangerous from an aqidah perspective, belief perspective. Yeah, but later on, some of the important scholars, such as the Mutakallimun period, which we call, they are Islamic theologians, such as Ash'ari, Maturidi, Shahristani, Nasafi, and Taftasani, they provided some interpretations for these expressions. And they claim that if the interpretation is aligned with the core teachings of the Qur'an, it is acceptable. So they gave permission to make interpretations, which we call ta'wil. They need to be aligned with the core teachings of the Qur'an. And these scholars in general, they were called Ahl al-Ray, School of Reason. Another famous scholar, I think this is very important, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, he argued that if naql and aql contradict, which means if what is transmitted, what's revealed, contradicts with intellect, with reason, human logic, reason, and intellect, he says, this is a formula he makes, aql needs to be interpret the naql. So intellect needs to interpret what is revealed, what is the text. Correct, yeah. And this is interestingly, he adds something at the end of it. He says that aql should be aql. So it should be an authority, authority in Islamic theology, authority in the exegesis of the Quran, authority in hadith, in all fields. So aql needs to be aql. So the transcendent attributes of God proclaim that God does not have a physical hand. For example, therefore, these expressions definitely need to be interpreted. For this reason, a number of scholars, for example, interpreted the hand as supremacy, authority, power, lordship, sustainer, and so on. And they interpreted the sitting on his throne as being exalted over everything, or creating, having the power to create everything, controlling everything, and every event in the universe and existence is dominated by God. They interpret it that way as well. Also having an absolute majesty, God. Being the only agent that possesses true power, as sitting on the throne, above the throne, and this is not a direction. It means exalted. He's above everything.
Yeah.
And having dominance over all of his creation and so on. So they did interpret them in this manner. But as I said, these Islamic theologians of Ahl Sunnat wal Jama'ah, they always, adhered and stuck to the middle path, and they made sure that every reasoning is loyal to the core of the Quranic teachings.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Omer, for those interpretations. It was quite an area that we've just discussed, and hopefully we'll continue with our series.
Inshallah. Thank you for inviting me, Wes.
Not a problem at all. And we'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.